Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm doing my December wrap-up. Now I've read quite some books, I think more than 10. So you might want to grab something to drink because we're gonna be here for a while. Now luckily 2 books I loved so much that I know they're going to be on my best books of the year list, potentially even 3, but one I'm not entirely sure because I haven't really made the list yet because I'm kind of keeping that for when we're actually in 2022. So 2 of the books, because I don't want to talk about them twice in a very short amount of time, I'm going to not talk about them now, and you're gonna have to see my best books of the year video to find out what they were. Now I actually already filmed this video last Monday. It was supposed to go on Tuesday, and I know December wasn't up then, finished, done. But planning wise it was better. However, apparently the upload failed and I only realized a couple of days later. So I figured why not just now still add the books that I've read in the meantime, because I've read quite a lot of books this week. Also I realized that there was a whole book I forgot in that video. So I'm going to now insert the clip of the books that I read previous to Monday. Again, those are quite a lot. And then I'll see you for the other books that I'm going to talk about now. So you're gonna see some light changes, you might see some position changes. You will notice I'm still wearing the same sweatshirt thingy, warm thing apparently, but present me will see you in a while. Let's start with the DNF first. The book that I DNF'd is, it's not about the burqa by Maryam Khan. It's a collection of essays by Muslim women about being a Muslim, about being women, about being Muslim women in mostly the UK but also some other countries, and what that means for them, for their families, and all kinds of stuff. And the reason that I DNF'd it was because I was liking it. I was listening to it on audio, and it's because it's essays, they were making the kind of points that you want to go back to, that you want to underline, that you want to digest, and I wasn't able to do that on audio. I was just listening to it and it went over me, and it wasn't really coming in because of the type of points they were making. So I decided if I'm just going to keep listening to it now, I'm not going to appreciate it. Well, I just knew that I would appreciate it more if I read it on paper. So it's one of those books that I'm going to keep my eyes out for. I don't think it's going to be hard to find it in the Netherlands, but if one day I come across it, then I will definitely get it, because I think, I don't know, I really liked it and I would like to spend more time with it. So that's the reason I DNF'd that one. Now one of the books that might make it to my best books of the year, I don't really know yet because I haven't dived into it, is Guest House for Young Widows Among the Women of ISIS by Azadeh Moaven. This is a non-fiction, and Azadeh Moaven follows a group of maybe 10 women that are, some of them were pretty young, some are still about 14, some are somewhat older, maybe about 30. They're living in different countries. We've got Tunisia, we've got the UK, we've got Germany, we've got Syria. I think those are most of them. And they are all in some way or another going to be wanting to go to Syria to support the ISIS and the movement surrounding it. And what she does in this book, and the reason that it's brilliant to me, is that she really wants to show that the women of ISIS, they're not one group. There is not one thing that links all of these women, all of these girls. They have very different backgrounds, they have very different reasons for going. They don't all have one reasons. There's reasons, maybe there may be various components to them wanting to go there, going there, to their journey to go there, to their what happens to them when they're there, to how they get out or don't get out, etc., etc. With this book, she really wants to show us that you can't see them as one group. They're still individuals, and that the women in Tunisia have, for example, have more in common with the reasons for the men in Tunisia to want to join ISIS than the women that are from the UK, for example. So I really love this one. I had already started it last month, but I realized that I wasn't diving into it too much. So when I was halfway through, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start all over again and really take my time with it and underline stuff. And because of that, I really appreciated it even more, and I understood also more. She doesn't only talk about the story of these very different women, but also about the rise of ISIS in different countries, how Muslim people are treated in different countries, etc., etc. So it's very, very interesting, and I would highly recommend this one, even though I will say it's not easy to read. There's a lot of information with it, so yeah, that's the reason that I kept underlining stuff. I'd really recommend it. It's super interesting, and I don't know, it shows... It's also something that you can broaden to other topics, that a group that might do the same thing do it for very, very different reasons, and you can't look at that group. Generalizations have consequences, basically. So, love this one. Might make it to the best books of the year list. One that definitely won't was my German pick of the year. It's Frauen mit grossen Augen by Angeles Mastreta. Actually, this is a Mexican author, and the original title is Mujeres de ojos grandes, which, by the way, translates to Women with Big Eyes. I wanted to read one German book this year, and it ended up being this one. It's a short story collection about women in Mexico. It was written in the 1930s, and apparently at that time it was special that this book came out because the women in Mexico they were invisible, basically. Everything was always about the men, and the role of the women in society and all of the tasks they do weren't discussed. And that is what this book does. Every chapter is another story of one of the women and their day-to-day lives and their wishes, their dreams, their relationships with their husbands, etc., etc. It was in German, and my German isn't that great. I mean, it's good enough to kind of understand the book, so I got like the gist of the stories. But it's not good enough, and I was struggling too much to really appreciate it. I wouldn't be able to tell you. Usually, now I know that with books that are originally written in the Latin language, I don't like it when they're translated to Dutch. And probably that would be the same now that it's translated in German. But luckily, my German is not good enough that I noticed any of that. So that's kind of a positive. I don't really know. I think due to my German, I can't really say much about whether I appreciated this book or not. It didn't work for me. I find myself, and I have that often with short story collections, especially when they're from one author, that I'm just waiting for the thing to end. I prefer the stories to be linked more. I need more of a narrative that is longer, and now I was just counting the pages, and I think the last few stories I kind of skimmed over. I don't think it's the book. I think it's me and short story collections. So if you've read this one, I would love to hear what your thoughts about it were. The person that gave me this book to read did really like it, but I'm going to have to talk to her because, yeah, it didn't work for me. And I don't really know why. I don't really know what sets these women apart. The stories just didn't do anything to me. I don't remember any of them, even. And I just finished this last week or so. So that's Frauen with grossen Augen, and mostly my experience with that. Then we've got a French book. It's not translated into any other language. It's called L'heure des chiens by Thomas Feccio, and this would translate to The Hour of the Dogs. So this is written by an author that came from the city that my mother comes from, so where we also always go back to for Christmas and holidays and stuff because my grandparents still live there. And the book is also set in that city. It's Soissons in the north of France. And the north of France had a pretty hard time during the First World War, and they've never really recuperated. There's still a lot of buildings with bullet holes and stuff, and the whole region is still very poor. And this book is set in that, and it also touches a little bit on the First World War and the consequences of that. So the book is about two bodies being found, well, a hand and a body in the water. And there's a whole mystery surrounding it, and we follow the police agents, well, two police agents that are trying to solve the case. And it's one of those books that is not going to become very popular, I think, because it tries to do so much. With the whole mystery, we see dogfights, dogs. We see stuff with the First World War and possible phantoms. Phantoms? There's another word. Ghosts. Possible ghosts of the First World War, of military people at that time. It touches also on stuff that happened in the Second World War. It touches on immigrants that want to go via Calais, want to go to the UK. It touches upon the rise of right extremists and not wanting there to be any immigrants. It touches upon people that are fired from their jobs. It touches upon people that have to go to what's it called? Those clinics when you're addicted to something. It touches upon having a marriage that you're not happy with. It wants to do a lot of things, and while I liked it a lot for it being in Soissons and me recognizing places and recognizing also, you know, the problems of the people, these are all things that are relevant to the region, but when a book tries to do so much, oftentimes it doesn't work. And that was the case with this one. I mean, it was fine to read. It was a quick read. I'm not really going to remember this book besides from, oh, they're now in the Avenue de Long, I know that, and stuff like that. So that was, yeah. And also the writer dedicated this one, I've got a signature thingy, which is nice. L'étranger by Albert Camus. This is another French one, and I'm going to do a separate review for this one, but it'll be in French, which is the reason I'm still going to talk about it now. This is one of those books that is well known in France, and it's written by Albert Camus. And Albert Camus is a writer. He also wrote The Pest, which was quite popular last year because it talks about living in a place where there is some kind of pandemic going on, so you can imagine why that was popular last year. This is one of his first books, and it was written in 1942, and it's about a man that is living in Algeria, a French man living in Algeria, and he doesn't have a lot of emotions. He buries his mom, and while there's nothing wrong with their relationship, it does nothing to him. And shortly later, he befriends a neighbor of his who hits his wife, which also doesn't do anything to our main character. And the brother of that wife is not really happy about it, so he tries to contact the neighbor and say like, hey, I want you to stop and stuff, and there's some altercations going on, and with one of those altercations our main character kills that man and goes to prison and is executed for it. You know, it's one of those books that you already know what the plot is going to be, but it's really about the execution. The execution, the writing, I really liked it. It was simple. It was the narrator is our main character, so you really got the sentiment that he has, that, you know, he's just going through the motions and things don't do much to him. He's more preoccupied with, oh, it's warm, than, oh, my mother is lying in a casket, for example. I thought that was done very well. The reason that I want to do a separate the thing that hits me with this one is that the man that is murdered, he's only talked about as being the Arab. And also at one point there's his friends, and they're the Arabs. He's not named. There's nothing said about his family, maybe mourning him. There's also the justice process thing in this book, and it's never talked about that a life has been taken away, that this man has a story, that he was maybe quite legitimately trying to make the point that, hey, please don't hit my sister. There's none of that. He's just the Arab. And it shows so much about the colonial mindset of the time and of that of Camus. Camus was always very pro-Algeria being a part of France. So I really like this book, but because of the absurdism and how easy it was to read, I mean, I read this in a day, it's a small book, but the Arab thing, nowadays you look at it differently. And there is an Algerian author that in 2013 wrote a reaction, basically, a rewriting of this story, focusing on the Arab. He names him, he gives him a story, he talks about his family, he shows how, well, people were sad that he was killed, obviously. It's called the Meursalt. I can't remember. I'll put the name here in case you're interested to read it for Invisible Cities, because I know that Algeria is a country in January of Invisible Cities. So I really like this one, but there are issues with it. Then I also read Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Hamnet won the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and everybody was very enthusiastic about it, so I finally also picked it up. It actually has been sitting on my shelf for quite some months. So Hamnet is about the family of Shakespeare when they live in the UK in the Middle Ages, and one of Shakespeare's children becomes ill, and it's also about so the son is called Hamnet. It's also mainly about the mother and what her spirit is like, and how she cares for her family, and how she struggles with Shakespeare, being, you know, away from home and doing Shakespearean stuff. And it's about living a little bit in the Middle Ages when you're different, when you're I don't know, free spirit basically, and about the rest of the family. The writing is beautiful. It's very lyrical, it flows very well, and it fits the parts where the book was about the mother. She is that writing. She is one of those free spirits that just, you know, like a fairy basically. She's just a grown fairy. And the writing portrayed that very well. And my issue with the writing is that because I thought it fitted the mother so well, when it talked about other things, I thought it was still too lyrical for what they were. So the father of Shakespeare is a very brutish man and not very kind, and he's having issues with hitting people, and but then he was written still so beautifully that I was like, but no, don't waste your words on him. I would have liked that contrast to be a little bit bigger. I think that bothered me a little bit. Another thing that I loved in the book is that Shakespeare's never named. It's always the father of blah blah blah, the Latin tutor, the husband of. I love that. Now when we look at him, he's, you know, he's William Shakespeare, blah blah blah. We never talk about the fact that he had a family and what he came from, and etc. etc. It's always William Shakespeare. So by removing him in that way, he was less present. It was more of a, no, I am not your wife. You are my husband. I really liked that dynamic. Although once I'd seen that he was never named, I could only see that, and therefore he kind of became bigger. But I love that he was something in relationship to others, and not the other way around. So that was really, really nice. I did appreciate it. In fact, I gifted the book to my mother for Christmas because I think she's going to like it. So yeah, that's Hamnet. But I don't think it didn't work as well for me as for others because I missed a little bit of narrative, maybe. I'm a person that likes a little bit more of narrative. Now let's talk about the books that I finished this week, which again are quite a lot. First off, I read Wat wij zagen by Hanna Bervoets. This is, so in the Netherlands there's a week of books every year. I think it's in March, I'm not entirely sure. But in that week, if you buy a book from a bookstore, you also get the book week gift of that year, and it's always written by a different author. And this time it was written by Hanna Bervoets, who is a more well-known Dutch author, in the Netherlands at least. And Wat wij zagen it's always short, it's a novella. Is about a woman who starts to work at an unnamed social media company, and she has to work as a content moderator. And she sees, you know, she's the person that when you flag something, she sees that, and then she has to decide whether it's going to stay on there or whether it should go get off of the platform, and then say why that is. And as you can imagine, that has consequences for her and her co-workers' mental health, and it's kind of about that and her relationship with her co-workers and why she's doing that job, etc, etc. I really like Hanna Bervoets' writing style. I already previously read one of her other books. It's called De Rijk der Zieke, and that was too abstract for me, and this one was less abstract, and I really liked it. I'm still confused by the ending, but I liked also that she's very unapologetic about talking about female stuff. I mean, she talks about menstruation, she talks about masturbation, and it's all just yeah. I mean, one part of me does find it shocking, and then I'm like, but why am I shocked about reading about a woman masturbating? So there is that element to it, and I think it's good for me that the prude version of me needs to read this kind of stuff. So I would recommend that if you have the Boekenweek geschenk. I will say this is one of the better ones because there are some years where they're just a little bit meh. This one is a good one. One of the books I also read was The Secret History by Donna Tart. It was a reread. I already read it, I think 3 years ago, and I really liked it then. I read it in Dutch, and that's the reason I have the Dutch version here. Now I read it on audio, and in script it's actually narrated by Donna Tart, which didn't work for me. I didn't like her voices, and it really... the voices that she gave to the characters, especially Bunny. Bunny is not supposed to be a likable character, but because of the inflections and the accent, I nearly put away the book because of that. And I feel horrible for not liking her version of the audiobook. But I did continue listening to it, and I'm happy that I did. It's one of those, it's quite big, but you really get sucked in and you really want to continue, even though it is not very plot driven. It's just a very well made book. So in case you don't know, because a lot of people, this has been doing the rounds, a lot of people love this one. This is a dark academia book, and we follow a group of students that are learning ancient history at university, and our main character kind of goes there, and he's allowed to be a part of this small group of 5 to 6 students. They're kind of living a different life from the rest of the university. They're very separate. They feel they're very elitist. They're talking about Socrates and blah blah blah. And on the first page, this is not a spoiler, but you already know that they are going to murder one of their own. And in this book you get to know, well, first of all, Richard's story of how he comes to that group and how he gets included, but also how they come to the decision that no, they can't keep having this person around. And I still remembered that from reading it the first time. That whole narrative and all the things that happened there were still in my memory. But the second half of the book is also about the aftermath and how they deal with, you know, the body being found and the discoveries, and dealing with knowing that you did something like that to someone and the family and stuff. And I had no recollection of that. None whatsoever. I think even that in my memory, the book kind of stops at the murder. But again, there's a whole, this is not a little thing. So I'm very curious how that happened in my brain. It was still very enjoyable on a reread, even with knowing the things. This is a book, I mean, on the first page you're basically told that they're going to murder one of their own. It's really one of the books that shows that knowing what is going to happen does not influence how much you're going to like something, even, you know, rediscovering, because it is about the depth and the characters. And I mean, they're an elitist, unkind, even very unlikable bunch. None of them are people that I would ever want to hang out with, but it was very enjoyable on a reread, despite it being very big. Now this week I also picked up a historical fiction by Minette Walters. I have the French version. Don't know why. In French it's called La Dernière Heure, but the English version is called The Last Hour. It's historical fiction set in the 14th century, and the pest breaks out. Now, I picked this up because it's a big book and I needed space on my shelves. So I thought, this is going to work. I think this is going to be, you know, one of those fast-paced, a bit meh books. It wasn't. It was fast-paced. I think I read this one in maybe 2 days, and you know, it's one of those books, I'm going to talk about what it is in a second, but I was a couple of maybe 40, 50 pages from the end, and I was really liking it. And then I thought, we still have a lot of plot to go by the end of the book. I don't have enough pages. So I flipped to the end, and there it said, you know, to be continued. And it was one of those days where I had spent the whole day sitting on the couch reading the book and thinking I was going to come to an end. It was one of those, I read a book in a day. Well, I read half of the book in a day. I'm going to finish this, it's all going to be tied off. I'm going to go to bed knowing that it's really too late, but I enjoyed my book and I finished it. But it wasn't finished. There was a second book to come. It broke my heart. And it was already past midnight by that point, and I knew that I wasn't gonna get answers. Luckily, I mean, 1 page before the last, you still think you're going to end on this huge ass cliffhanger. Luckily that wasn't the case, but still. So I spent some difficult moments with all of my feelings, and then I saw that the second book was on script, so I finished that also in the couple of days afterwards. Anyway, let me talk about the book. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's The Pest Breaks Out. And we follow mainly two characters in a village called Devilish. One is Lady Anne. She does not like her husband. She can read, she's educated, and she believes that if you treat your serfs kindly, if you feed them, then they are happy and produce more stuff. It's very weird. So she kind of makes sure that they have a more healthy life behind the back of her husband. And when the pest breaks out, he's not actually in the village. They get the news that the pest has broken out, and she thinks, okay, I know that when there's disease, you need to separate the healthy and the unhealthy. So she decides, well, we're going to close our village off, and if people want to come in, then they have to spend 14 days outside first. Her husband is not happy about that. He comes with the pest to the mount of the village, and he wants to come in. She won't let him. He passes away. That happens in the first couple of pages, and then you kind of see how the village fares with them being inside and not having news from the outside. And most of the villagers love Lady Anne and what she does for them, because they've seen through the years how good she is and how the things that she says, how that helps. Some see her as being a heretic, because the pest is supposed to be only for the people that have sinned and blah blah blah, it's punishment, and she says, yeah, okay, but just wash your hands and you'll be fine, basically. So it's about that. She also took a serf under her wings because she saw that he was very, very intelligent. He's called Thaddeus, and he's going to get a bigger role in the village. And in the second book, they kind of, well, no, already a little bit in this one, there is some intrigue because the daughter of Lady Anne hates her mother and she wants to break up the peace in the village. There are also some other characters that want to do that. So Thaddeus and some youngsters have to go away, and they also have to go on the one hand because there's going to be problems in the village, on the other because they have to go find some food. And then the second book, they're kind of working on a ploy to make sure that the people, when a lord is inflicted upon them because the lord of the village has passed away, blah blah blah, they want to make sure that the serfs are free men by then, that they can decide to work, that if they work somewhere that they have to be paid. So there's intrigue going on with that. I really like this. I thought it was going to be meh, and I realized that I only thought that because the other two books that I bought at the same time as this one were meh. Apparently that doesn't influence the other books. They're not siblings. Although in my head they were kind of siblings. No, this was very enjoyable. I think also because there were some things that I obviously recognized from our pandemic life. There is something in this that I liked that I think will not work for a lot of people, and that is that there are a lot of discussions between characters that were not agreeing, and it was a lot of tell, not show. They were really explaining their views through words and less through deeds. But what I liked about that is that because there were so many of those discussions, there were some characters that you saw grow or change from discussion to discussion, that after 3 discussions, after 3 moments of not agreeing, they would change their ways. And I liked how a lot of the characters evolved in that way, and that also goes through in the second book. But because they're somewhat longer, and because again they're more discussions than deeds, I think that won't work for a lot of people. They will find it a little bit too on the nose. There's not a lot of nuance, I thought, to this, which worked very well for an end of year book. Appreciated this. The second book, by the way, is called, so this is The Last Hour, and the other is The Turn of Midnight. And the series is called The Black Death. Now that concludes this long video about the books that I've read in December, because I've read quite a lot, and some books were a little bit further already in my memory, so this might be a little bit hectic video. Very sorry for that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. And that should be the best books of the year. I'm very excited for it. Bye!
Ba-dum, ba-dum, dum.